Welcome back to the show, folks. This is the Shankly Sessions, the Liverpool podcast we bring you each and every week. Hope you're enjoying the international break. Normally, I wouldn't be enjoying it at all. I'd be missing the football, but I have to say it's been refreshing being able to recharge the batteries in terms of the pressure of weekly content from the Premier League and the European Cups and stuff like that. So it's been a nice little break. We've been dropping a few shorts and stuff like that. We did do Thursday tier talk last week, and I did do the mashup. No mashup this evening, obviously, because there's no real games to review and stuff like that and all. So I said I'd jump on and do a little show about just a kind of a Liverpool assessment to have a look at the season and the fixtures and how it's gone and give a view on it, have a look at our current starting lineup and maybe some of the frailties that are there. Have a chat about our season and how it has gone and can we pinpoint some of the issues that are there. And then what I said is I'd have a look at the squad itself and take a view on the squad, look at the players that we might be keeping, the players that are going out the exit door potentially, and maybe take a view on other players as well. Should they be in the squad this season, up and coming, or should they, go out on loan or be sold as well? And you're welcome to give your views on that as well. And again, it's only a view from my point of view, so I didn't necessarily look at any starting lineup, not sort of formations and stuff like that, because it's kind of a minefield as I got into looking at the potential transfer targets and stuff like that. And you look at them and they each bring something different. And they don't all necessarily fit into a formation or another formation or whatever it is. So I had to look at it from a different point of view, not necessarily just 4-3-3, not necessarily just 3-5-2, not necessarily just 14-3-1. So many different kind of permutations there, which it's kind of by doing that exercise actually the other day. I spent a bit of time on it on Saturday putting it together, but what it did do is it got me thinking about the solution to the issues within our squad. They're not that simple. It's not a case of just going out and buying two midfielders. It's not a case of going out and getting another centre back. It's not a case of going out and just getting a right back for Trent. It's not a case of just potentially moving Trent into midfield. There's so much more and so many different permutations when you look at this stuff. And it'd be cool to get an insight into their thinking, like when they do sign a player. It'd be cool if they did some sort of show on LFC TV or something like that, going, okay, we've signed player X, and here's what led us to the decision. The player X is the player that should go in there. This is what we're expecting from him. This is how we're going to use him. All this kind of thing and stuff like that. So it'd be nice to get an insight into the way they kind of, the whole mix between the kind of manager, coaching staff, statistical analysis, analytics, all that kind of stuff. And then also the sporting director and how they arrive at a decision where they go, right, we're signing him. Some of it obviously is very obvious and stuff like that. I mean, look, we'll talk about it a little bit later when we get into it. But when you talk about kind of say Jude Bellingham, he has so many fantastic attributes that it walks off the page at you basically. You know what I mean? It's not something you have to think about. That boy fits into many different sides. Straight away improves every team and every midfield. Absolute sensational player. Obviously going to cost an arm and a leg in the current market. But maybe it's worth it, maybe it isn't, who knows? And these are kind of some of the factors that we're going to look at as well. But we'll start off. We'll start off. What we'll do is we'll look at some of the fixtures, and I've highlighted some of them in red. Some of the fixtures that were really kind of poor results throughout the season, and where it kind of started to unravel as a season. Now it's a season that promised so much, but is probably going to deliver so little. With the exception of a top four, potentially top four position, which even at that looks a stretch now with Newcastle returning to form. Good evening, my friend. How are you? Kenny out, anyone in? Maybe we could get Nagelsmann or something like that, or Conte or something like that. Morris. Who knows? I'll be doing this podcast for a while, Morris, and then I'll be off after about half an hour, and we'll take a look. Ireland are playing France tonight, so we want to have a good look at that as well, and give our thoughts maybe later on. But good to have you in the chat, my friend. So let's start. Let's get a rundown on these fixtures, which were a little bit painful. I'll go a little bit full screen because I'm blind in my old age. But the first one I've pinpointed, and I've pinpointed a couple of times this season, was this Strasbourg game right after the Community Shield. And that was the one where we lost Konate when he picked up that injury. Needless game, didn't need to happen. Didn't add anything to the pre-season. And was a disappointing result. Wasn't a bad pre-season. Went pretty well, culminating with I thought should have been the win of the Community Shield against Man City. But then we go and play this game at Anfield, this Strasbourg game, which was just, for me, I don't know whether it was a combination of greed or just pushing it too far or whatever it was, and we lost Konate, Then the first day of the season, of course, at Craven Cottage, rocked up there and got taught an absolute lesson. Shouldn't have even escaped with a point, if we're to be honest. Mitrovic was an absolute terror on the day. Fulham absolutely controlled us. Palhinha and all, they did an unbelievable job on us. And we were lucky to escape with a draw and a really poor result to kick off the season on the back of losing Konate in that friendly. Then we went on and we drew with Crystal Palace. Again, another horrible result. And then on the 22nd of August, I did a podcast. I was in Florida at the time. I was in Orlando. And I went and I watched this game in a pub in Orlando with Ben. And again, a really poor result from us. Literally didn't show up first half. Gave it a bit of a go second half, but just terrible on the day. Lacked a lot of invention. Bounced back, of course, with the 9-0 win there at Bournemouth, and then the 2-1 win against Newcastle, if you remember. That was the Carvalho coming out party, 98-minute goal that sealed those points. So you look at this, the warning signs were there. Obviously, the 9-0 Bournemouth game is quite an anomaly in the middle of all this, starting off with 2 draws, then a loss to Man United, then pumping Bournemouth 9-0, and then we were kind of thinking, okay, here we go. This is the start of our season now. The lads have woken up from pre-season and the disappointment of injuries and whatever it is. Let's go. Let's start our season. Then we got the win against Newcastle, and we were thinking, okay, that was a bit of a struggle. We expect Newcastle to be a good team this season, but just about got there. Then the Everton 0-0 was the one I was over, actually, a Clash of the Castle with Darren off the Thursday Tier Talk. We were over at Clash, and I was kind of, I didn't see this game, but I listened to it and I watched most of the highlights back. And again, another poor showing. They dragged us down into a proper kicking match and could have ultimately beaten us, to be honest. Had a number of chances. Really, really poor. Then the real shocker of the season, and not a shocker in terms of the result, because we know it's difficult to go and beat Napoli away. But the shocker was really the fact that we got pumped 4-1. Could have been 6 or 7-1 in truth. And then we lost Robbo to injury just after that as well, which was really, really disappointing. So that was a really poor result. And that began us beginning to question the frailties in the team, the lack of signings in the summer, not bringing in not refreshing the midfield as we hadn't done for 5, 6, 7 transfer windows, and it started to unravel somewhat. But then we kind of got our game back on. Obviously, we had the 2 games that were postponed when the Queen passed away. And in between that, the game that wasn't cancelled was obviously the Ajax game in the Champions League, where we won 2-1 against Ajax. Again, a decent result to kind of get us back on track in the Champions League, because after getting pumped by Napoli the way we did, we were concerned. Came back then the 1st of October. Again, another poor result against Brighton, the 3-3. And this is, again, when I say these are poor results, this is no disrespect to the teams that are getting these results. And this is just we should operate at a level above Brighton. And I know Brighton has been kind of a bogey team for us at times as well. And look, we've been there, wrote the book, you know. Then we beat Rangers 2-0 at home. And again, that was one that didn't, you know, in the face of it, you could say, yeah, we could have scored a few and it could have been comfortable. But I know in the last 15 minutes, I think it was, Rangers really put us under the cushion that game. And we were kind of, again, showing a little bit of frailty. Then we headed to the Emirates, and Arsenal beat us 3-2. Again, there was a contentious penalty decision, and but this is how it went. It went 3-2. But on the back of that, then we lost Trent, we lost Joel Matip, and we lost Luis Diaz. Luis Diaz was a huge one for us because he really is kind of. We've spoken a number of times this season when we talk about that energy that Darwin brings, and you know, Lewis is that way as well. When he's on the pitch, he raises the energy and the performance levels of players around him because he kind of demands it in the way that he plays. Darwin is very much in the same vein. Went up to Rangers and beat Rangers 7-1, much more comfortable away from home. And then we beat Man City 1-0, and then we beat West Ham 1-0, and we were thinking, okay, maybe we're going to start and kick on now, and let's see what happens. And we've had a lot of this stop-starting this season where we thought, right, we go on kind of a little bit of run, maybe a couple of wins and a draw, whatever it is, but we're turning that corner, starting to find a rhythm, and we're getting good results, you know. And then Nottingham Forest beat us 1-0, which is a really, again, not an easy place to go. Cooper doing really good things with Forest there. Tough place to go, tough fan base on top of you and stuff like that. Very, very boisterous. But we just, again, we rocked up and we just didn't fancy it. And because we go in there with that kind of an impression and attitude and arrogance about these things, got beaten 1-0. Then we beat Ajax away, which was a huge result for us. So you can see the pattern here, like putting really, really good run together in the Champions League, but really, really struggling home form. Then the one that really disappointed me was the one over the Christmas period against Leeds. We kind of huffed and puffed and we created a lot of chances, but we couldn't score goals, couldn't find the net. Leeds, I think, took the early lead in that game, I think on 12 minutes, if I'm right, or 10 minutes or something like that. And then we equalised, and then we were pushing and pushing and pushing for the winner. And we got caught laid on in that game, and Leeds sucker punched us. I think it was Somerville, if I can remember. Or did he get the first? But I think Somerville might have got the winner. This kind of launched him as a player then, because he went on a run of a couple of good performances. But poor for us. Then we kind of had the game against Napoli. This was the return leg at Anfield, which we had to win, and we did. Won it 2-0. Quite a kicking affair and stuff like that. Got a little bit tasty at times. And then we went away to Spurs and we beat Spurs 2-1, which was a very good result. And then we drew 0-0 with Derby, but went through on penalties 3-2. But really, again, poor. Then we went and we beat Southampton, which is the minimum you would kind of expect. Let's get into this and then I'll come back to some comments. Man City 3-2 then beat us in the Carabao Cup, so coughed up our first domestic trophy that we had won the previous season. Beat Villa 3-1, and then beat Leicester 2-1, and here we go again. Potentially time to go on a run. Are we turning the corner? Can we put a run together and move right up the table? Most of this season, some of it we were down in the bottom half, and most of it we've been hovering around 10th, 8th, 9th, that kind of thing. Then Brentford beats us 3-1. Again, another total capitulation. No one really showed up. No one came out of most of these games unscathed. Then we drew with Wolves 2-2 on Anfield in the FA Cup, forcing this replay. We went through 1-0 on the replay, of course, and crunched in between that. We had another defeat to Brighton. Brighton beat us 3-0. Again, just like a bogey team, but just bullying us, you know, couldn't deal with McAllister, couldn't deal with Matoma, especially Matoma. Matoma was just rinse and Trent in these games. Sully March, we couldn't deal with. So many players just couldn't deal with. And of course, Brighton boy at the Serbi, and they're doing a fantastic job and stuff like that after Potter's exit to Chelsea. Then we get into the Brighton 2-1 defeat in the FA Cup again. Really, really poor performance. And then that was the one. Where's the one? Wolves 3, Liverpool 0. So bad. Just absolutely got bullied. And that's the game where we lost Thiago in that game. And it was a really, really bad performance as well, insofar as like we were just like, even Adama Traore was tearing us asunder. That's how bad it got. I think Adama actually scored a goal on the day, to be honest. Then we went out and beat Everton. A really, really poor performance from Everton that night. They were absolutely shocking that night. Their defence was all over the place. We won 2-0. Could have been a lot more. And then we travelled to St James's Park and put in a performance and won 2-0. And we're thinking, here we go again. So this is a lot of, like, 2 or 3 really good performances, and then just all falls asunder again. Just no consistency at all. Some of it related to injuries. Some of it later, and we get into that, just poor tactical setup, poor lineups, poor substitutions, in-game management, the timing of it, and all that kind of stuff just came back to bite us. Then the wheels really came off. We drew Real Madrid. We lost Gomez in that game. But we got beaten 5-2 after being 2-0 up. We were 2-0 up, had a chance to make it 3, missed that chance. Then Real scored. Then we had a chance to make it 4-1, missed that. And then that howler by Alisson off Vinicius into the back of the net, making it 2-2. And then second half came out, early goal. Trent didn't track his markers, no marking. And Militao scored a header. And then Benzema, it just all unfolded from there and ended up 5-2. So that match really ended our situation in terms of a trophy for this season. And our participation in the Champions League, because going to the Bernabeu expecting to overturn that was just it was just way too much to expect that to happen. And in fairness, we'll talk about the game back there. It was absolutely blunt. Followed that up then with a really poor draw, Crystal Palace. Again, never in the game. Palace dominating us in the midfield, and this has been a consistent pattern through this season. Getting dominated in the midfield. So because we get dominated in the midfield, we're getting exposed in the defence, and we're disjointed up front, because up front seems very isolated because we're not winning out in the midfield. So it was very hard to build. So a lot of our play then was coming from the fact that we'd have to launch long balls, or those diagonal balls where we tried to hit Salah or tried to hit Darwin, stuff like that. We were reduced to that because the play in midfield was so poor, especially with Thiago gone. So really, really poor. Then we beat Wolves 2-0 at Anfield, and then we thumped Man United 7-0, the 7-up game that everyone talks about. That got us thinking, this was one of those games that was probably a combination of us, everything just going for us on the day. Everything we did just hit home. We looked very like the Liverpool of old. And Manchester United with a total capitulation. They reminded me of us in some of these games this season, the way they just collapsed and then eventually they just gave up. We just broke their will, really. Then we come off that 7-0 will to Man United, and then we get beaten 1-0 by Bournemouth. And that's the game where we lost Stefan Bietic, and now we know that Bietic is gone for the season, and he was like one of our key highlights of the season was the breakthrough that he was having individually, not necessarily related to the results or that kind of thing, but just his overall play. And this has been a kind of a symptomatic thing this season, where we've had a lot of players coming through trying to make the grade and having to carry the team as well. How are you, buddy? You all right? Say hello to everyone. Do you want to say hello? Do you want to say hello? Right, go on, sit down. I'll go with you now in a minute. Come on, sit down. And so that's where we absolutely capitulated on that one. As poor a performance as you'll see, making Dom Solanke look unbelievably good and stuff like that. And then we followed that up then with the Real Madrid game, and there was kind of like, it's, as we say, it's the hope that kills us. We lived in hope that potentially we could maybe turn around the Real Madrid result and maybe get it do something for us in terms of turning our season around? Could we score three unanswered goals in the Bernabeu, bring it into extra time, maybe in penalties? And it wasn't to be. We were poor on the night. We were kind of blunt. Created one or two early chances that didn't go for us, but kind of pittered out in the game. Real then took control of the game, was working us hard, and eventually they got a late on goal, which paved the way to the whole thing. Excuse me. And then, as we know, last weekend the Liverpool game was postponed, the Fulham game. So we've had no game for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And we find ourselves in, some Liverpool fans would say, a welcomed international break. So that was kind of a sum up of where we are this season in terms of our fixtures and what went on. Morris back in the comments here. This drop off has been awful, but at least not as bad as Chelsea's. Yeah, not as bad. I suppose Chelsea's kind of looks a little bit worse insofar as because they made the change, because they spent money, because they brought players in, and those players just haven't gelled yet. But I think the drop off for us has been worse in terms of being so far up there in terms of last year going for a quad, and of course we'll talk about that and how it's absolutely decimated the squad in terms of legs and energy and all that kind of stuff. But plenty of mitigating factors. But yeah, I think it's ours has been worse than Chelsea, if being honest, in the way we were performing last season. Won 2 domestic cups, final of the Champions League, and the last day of the season within 10 minutes of winning the league. So, yeah, massive drop off, absolutely. So some of the factors I wanted to look at, I think I'm not going to say a poorly constructed preseason. I thought the preseason was constructed pretty well. But I think that Strasbourg game, there was just absolutely no need for it. Absolutely no need for it. If you look at our transfer strategy, we obviously have to talk about the lack of midfielders coming in to refresh it, and the purchasing of forwards while key areas suffered. So we weren't aware of what Luis Diaz and what some of these injuries were. So the question is, we were bringing in Darwin, but we were chasing the midfield, and we know that there was money there for Tchouaméni. Didn't happen. He chose Real Madrid and went there, but then that just went up and it kind of evaporated, and it was like, we're no longer looking for a midfielder or whatever it was, But we knew it was clear. We had midfielders out there that had aged on. We had midfielders out there that weren't up to it. We had midfielders out there who were potentially going to leave. And we had midfielders out there that were very injury prone. We know that Thiago could pick up injuries quite easy. Ox injured and coming back in. Keita injury prone. So there was concern about that. And we found ourselves throughout the season in a situation where we were relying on Harvey Elliott, at times earlier in the season, Fabio Carvalho as well, and Stefan Bietic when he came in and established a position for himself. These were the guys who were carrying the team. And the marshals that we expected to carry the team, the senior players, the captains and the vice captains, they're the guys that didn't show up. So we had Virgil missing, Hendo was missing. Milner at times came in and did a job, but was playing more football than anyone perceived or expected when he had signed that extension. Literally playing, taking part week in, week out. The drop off from Trent was huge, to the point where it kind of nearly became petulance in his attitude. It's like as if he was listening to social media in terms of the criticism of his defending and stuff like that. And he eventually just started attacking him, kind of like, fuck your defending, I don't care. Just hands down, the amount of times that left side going down that side for us when teams were attacking was just void of anyone there. And the amount of covering that Matip or Kanate or Joe Gomez had to do was absolutely frightening at times for one reason or another. The tangible spending and stuff like that, we have to talk about FSG as well, and we can talk about this tangible spending. What I talk about, we talk about like we won the Premier League, they don't push the investment. we won the Champions League. They didn't push the investment. We were constantly ringing that towel of that Liverpool squad till eventually there was no juice in the orange anymore, if you like. We won a domestic cup double, didn't really spend the way we should have to kick on and plug those gaps and the aging and the various drop off and even that drop off between our starting 11 and our bench when you were bringing players on. You're taking off, say, Thiago, and you're bringing on Keita, or you're bringing on Ox or whatever. The drop off is monumental, really. And then, you get top four and there's still no money to spend, or you didn't get top four, there's no money to spend. And, so the narrative is kind of weird in terms of, and we got this whole, next summer we're going to do this, next year we're going to do this. And every year we were kind of mortgaging a season or mortgaging opportunities while aging this squad for what was going to happen the following summer or the following transfer window. That just simply didn't transpire. And that's not to say that we haven't spent money. We have spent money, but it's just when you look at how disjointed the squad is in terms of how we're set at a forward level, how disjointed we're set in the midfield level, and then couple that at the back with the drop off and confidence and stuff like that. I mean, these players 2.5 years ago, even last year, were absolutely unbelievable. Most of them are probably the best in the world in their position, and then the drop off is absolutely huge. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of that tangible spending, where you might have needed to buy maybe 3 players and you bought one and got like a loan in Arthur Mello, waste of time. Ben Davis coming in, waste of all these times. There's always a mitigating factor that we just didn't push it that bit further. We didn't spend that other 40 million or 50 million to bring in another player that would have made the difference. That additional centre back or that additional midfielder or 2 or whatever it is. And then that coupled then with panic loan signings. Didn't help either. Arthur Mello, an absolute disaster. Obviously brought in Calvin Ramsey, somewhat for the now, somewhat for the future, but again came in with an injured foot or whatever it was, couldn't play for us and stuff like that. He was the guy who was supposed to come in and challenge Trent for that position. Didn't happen for one reason or another. Then we had to switch back. Joe Gomez was in because Matip was injured. Konate was injured after that game, so we were being forced into play Joe Gomez. He had a number of decent performances for us, and then he had a number of absolute howlers, which is, we know that's the kind of modus with Joe Gomez. Very hard to get that 100% concentration out of him and that consistency over a run of games. But again, a versatile player who can be used at centre-back or cover at right-back and stuff like that. But again, when you're assessing him in the squad versus the drop-off, so if he goes in to replace Konate, massive drop off. If he goes in to play Trent, who we know Trent can be, massive drop off. So decent enough as a right back in terms of defending, doesn't offer a whole lot going forward. So kind of stymies us in terms of our formation and our tactical plans. So those kind of things. And then, of course, we have to talk about injuries. We have the highest in the league. I think we've missed 168 games in total through injury. If you tally them all up, I think it's the highest in the league by about 50 odd games, or about 30-40%, whatever it is, percentage wise. That coupled with the fact that we had no club doctor for the first 4 or 5 months of the season, which is unforgivable, really, for a club the size of Liverpool and where we're at and how we're trying to compete. And again, in terms of the way that we approach stuff from a business point of view with FSG, with the, this kind of conservative, careful spending and stuff like that, and you're up against the likes of Real Madrid, you're up against the likes of Man Cities and these teams, everything has to align in order for you to remain competitive. We have to have the best club doctor. We have to have the medical team on point. We have to literally have no injuries or very little injuries or short-term injuries, whatever it is. Otherwise, we find it very difficult to compete, and it's a real problem. Then we have to talk about, Klopp doesn't get a pass on this poor tactical game planning and in-game management. We've spoke about it throughout the season. I don't know on how many match reactions I've spoke about it where we're playing against teams where we just don't have a plan B, or when we instigate a plan B onto the pitch by deploying subs, we do it too late, so we don't give it enough time to take effect. I don't get this whole 60-minute thing. It drives me absolutely insane. We've had so many poor first half performances, and we've let it run all the way to the 60th minute, to the point where it's very difficult to recover it. Also, when we have deployed other players onto the pitch and we've tried to change things up a little bit into different formations, players have looked lost, like it's foreign to them, exposing us even further. Players not knowing what their position is, looking to Klopp on the sideline and to Linders and people like that to go, what is it you actually want me to do here? Tactical plans going out there where players are kind of on top of each other. We've seen it earlier in the season where Salah out so wide and stuff like that, and him and Trent occupying the same area, Hendo getting in there as well, and it just got all crowded and flustered where we couldn't open teams up. And because of the disjointment and that packing in of that space, we couldn't open teams up to do what we wanted to do, which was a real problem as well. Just let the mascot out here. Just wants to go out. All right. What you got? No, sorry about that. So those were the real issues, and these were things that we identified early on. It's similar to the need for a midfielder. We identified it early on. We obviously chased Tchouaméni and stuff like that, but we didn't follow it through. And then when we realised we were in the shit, it was kind of too late in terms of reacting to it and stuff like that. So it was a real problem. But some of those things, and then there was obviously a lack of confidence as well, a massive drop off in the squad. Players were obviously starting to believe the stuff that was being written about them and stuff like that. That unity in the squad wasn't there. We've seen on a number of results and a number of goals we've coughed up, poor goals that we've coughed up, a bit of finger pointing, a bit of people looking to blame other people and stuff like that. Something that generally has not gone on in our team and in our squad. We win as a team and we lose as a team normally, but that started coming out. We already spoke about how the drop off in the midfield led to the defence being exposed. Obviously, the former Fabinho and stuff like that, who's the guy who then tends to mop up everything. Less than a year ago, he was the best in his position on the planet, but the drop off had been monumental. We didn't really understand the effect of going for a quad and what it meant in terms of the mileage and the energy and the mental fatigue on those bodies that it expelled. Hence the reason no one's ever done it. But we got the closest we could get, down to 2 games. But again, the understanding of that, and then that drop off in performance as well. If you look at the spine of the team, I've spoken so many times this season about how we've no leaders on the pitch. The leaders on the pitch became the kids because of performance. But Van Dijk went quiet and into a shell. Henderson was anonymous on the pitch. Milner at times took that role a little bit, but more often than not, didn't either. Robbo, when he captained the team, again, quiet and afterwards trying to find excuses for things that didn't work and stuff like that. But that whole spine that we rely on right at the pitch, Mo Salah, although some of his numbers okay, by his level of performance, game after game after game, poor, huge drop off, really offering up nothing at times. I don't know whether it was related to Klopp tactically putting him out wide, or did he put him out wide? When he moved them inside, then he seemed way much more involved in the games and what we know he can do. But again, it took us too long to arrive at those decisions this season, And then, of course, we FSG, and I've spoke about FSG as well, and the timing of some of the announcements. We don't sign players that we want, and we bring in Melo on loan, and that was an absolute shambles. And then a week later, we're reporting record revenues and all this kind of thing, which gets the fan base up and anti that things, And then the investment announcement, stroke sale and stuff like that. And we thought, okay, maybe they'll sell the club or a huge proportion of the club, and we'll be able to get players and there'll be investment there. And then we find out, the club is never for sale. We're just looking for strong investment and all that kind of thing, and kind of led down the garden path on that as well through the January window. The timing of communication, as I said, about around key games and stuff like that, putting these communications out right at the start of the season when we haven't done what we should have done in the transfer window. Again, right prior to the Real Madrid game, I think, and then announcing, ticket prices going up and lots of things like that just really get fans' backs up and stuff like that. And the one thing we know about Liverpool as well, we need a team and we need a manager and we need a fans all, in this togetherness to bring us through, because we know at times where we haven't been as good as certain teams, we got through results with the fans pulling the team through and the boat acting in a tangent together and stuff like that. So then we ended up with FSG playing that sucker punch poker card where they got this infighting in the fans. And because there was so much infighting in the fans, it deflected away from the real issues, was the lack of investment, the timing of communication, the real focus within the FSG group. Is it Liverpool? Clearly it wasn't, because they were focusing on the Red Sox, they were focusing on the NBA project, they were focusing on hockey, whatever they were focusing on. They certainly weren't focusing on Liverpool Football Club. They were using Liverpool Football Club really as a cash cow to further other things. Then we find out that, you know, all this talk about investment and development and stuff like that, and we find out that the training ground and the new stand was all part of a loan that FSG lent Liverpool that had to be paid back. And then we hear that the new stand at the Anfield Road end that's being done at the moment is being funded out of Liverpool's direct money that they've been raising, stuff like that. Hence has stymied, let's say, the investment, which it shouldn't have, because these are all things that make Liverpool much more valuable down the road when FSG do eventually want to cash in on it. So yeah, we have owners here that don't necessarily take dividends in that direct way, like what we've seen with the Glazers at United, but eventually they'll cash in that chip, and that chip will have been created in terms of value through Liverpool Football Club, not through the work that FSG should have been doing to develop their investment. So really, really disappointing from that point of view. So they're just some of the things that I pinpointed throughout the season that went on and that we didn't react at times. You know, we were quite static and not dynamic in our way of doing things. Some of it was related to manpower issues. We just simply didn't have the manpower, but like simple little things like taking 5-6 months to get a club doctor in at Liverpool's level is unacceptable. So let's have a look at the squad and the transfers and what we think in that area. So if you look at this, I'm gonna go full screen on this as well, just so we can see it and stuff like that. So obviously, let's have a look there, and you see. So if you look at the exits that are kind of more or less nearly decided or not confirmed, information has been coming out. So we know that Bobby's moving on. That's 2/3 of that great trio gone then, you know. And of course, we don't know what's going to happen with Mo. There is talk of link to PSG and various things like that, so he may move on, or Liverpool may decide to cash in on him as part of this rebuild. Who knows? We know that Joel Matip is going to move on as well. We know that Naby Keita is gone, thank God. No disrespect, but it's just been an absolute fallacy and a joke. Ox for me is a disappointing one. He came in and, you know, did really, really well, and then he got those bad injuries and stuff like that. And since then, his career has petered out, and it's very sad because the guy's a heck of a baller, and at times he's been absolutely brilliant for us. But just plagued with injuries, and just mentally, I think more so than physically, just couldn't get over some of those big injuries. Reece Williams is one I think that will move on. I don't see him coming back in. Played a pivotal role in getting us into the Champions League that season with Nat Phillips and stuff like that. But a good lad. But again, the world for us has changed a lot because we're operating now at a very, very different level. We're going to be up against Man City, who again are going to move players on and reinvest. They brought in Haaland, unbelievable. Julian Alvarez, unbelievable. You know, to tell you how powerful Man City are, they're able to move Cancelo on, and it's not a problem. You know what I mean? So we have to be careful that. We know Adrian, we're going to have a big change in the goalkeeping area, I think, but the key thing is it's probably not going to cost us a lot of money. But obviously a little bit concerning because especially with Quiveen moving on, looks like he's going to move on in the summer because he wants game time. He's pushing for an Ireland spot up against Gavin Bazunu. Gavin is obviously playing week in, week out for Southampton. So in order to derail him out there, you've got to be playing week in, week out. And then probably Nat Phillips will move on as well, which kind of saddens me as well. So that pairing of Reece and Nat Phillips that really put their bodies on the line that time to get us back into the Champions League during that horrible season, will probably move on. So that's kind of what I've pitched out at the moment. I will talk about the others down below as well, and here we see and what's going to happen there as well. If you look at some of the targets, so if we start with the goalkeeping area, we got Alisson there absolute shoe-in. He's our main man. He's been our player of the season because he's had to be, not without fault at times himself, has coughed up a few howlers at times this season. But I mean, overall, I mean, God knows where we'd be if we didn't have Ali in nets. And then this young lad here, this is Harry Davis, I think. Is it Harry Davis or Harvey Davis coming in from the youths? I think he'll probably get brought up into the squad, doing big things and stuff like that. And then this guy here is the Anderlecht keeper, Bart Verrugen, I think is his name. He's the Dutch keeper as well. He'll probably come in, big lad, 6'4", has the look of a top keeper, doing real good things. Obviously the link there with Virgil and all through the Dutch team isn't going to cost a huge amount of money. I think looking at transfer market the other day, somewhere between 5 to 8 million maybe to bring him in. But obviously with Quevin moving on, Quevin is probably going to go for somewhere in the region of 20 to 25. So long as that additional 15 million or whatever it is ends up in this man's pockets, Klopp to spend, then we'll be okay and we can make a bit of money there and not be too exposed so long as Alisson stays fit. In the back line, I think the back line you're looking at, you got your Trent, Konate, Virgil, and Andy Robertson there. You've got Costas down below, who'll continue to challenge Robbo on that position. We've been linked with Josko Vardiol as the cover there for Virgil or Konate, or if we want to deploy a three-man defence in a 3-5-2 or something like that, pending. Again, this is what I was talking about earlier. When you look at these transfers and what way they might go, this is not a lineup, by the way, by any means, because some of these guys are more suited to 3-5-2, some of them are more suited to 4-3-3, some of them are more suited to 4-2-3-1. So it just depends on what you want to deploy on the day, whatever tactic against whatever team you're up against, but having that kind of blend there to be able to make different decisions. But also we have down here as cover as well, obviously in defence. Joe Gomez is there, Calvin Ramsey is there as cover. Milner can obviously go in there as cover. From the sounds of things, it looks like Milner's going to get another contract, so for another year. And so long as I think a lot of people have been up in arms about that, why? But I suppose when you look at it on the face of it, if you have him there as maybe a utility player where he's a fourth or a fifth choice or whatever it is, then that's fine. So long as this season we don't go down the road of multiple injuries again, and we're seeing James Milner week in, week out, I think we'll be okay. I'm not too upset with him being there as a utility player. I think it's important. He can play a role in midfield for us. He can play a role in defence for us. So not the worst thing to have whatsoever. Joe is a kind of a different one. Sometimes you look at it and you think, is it time maybe to cash in on Joe Gomez? Would you get 20 million for him now, 25 million maybe? Who knows? Depending on the market and stuff like that. But again, he's another player there that's like a utility player in terms of he can do central defence, he can cover for Trent at right back. The only worry I have there is when you start doing these things, you're not freeing up space maybe to bring in other players or promote other players out of the youth. So the problem that you have there is he's taking up a spot. Is the drop-off too significant? Is the drop-off and the consistency of Joe Gomez if Konate gets injured? Is that something that would worry us? Definitely it would worry me. And the same with Trent as well. But then they have to make a decision on Trent. What are we going to do with Trent? Is Trent going to remain as a right back? Is he going to be pushed into midfield? What kind of formation do we deploy? And that's why I was saying it's a minefield trying to decide on your targets and who you go for and what your strategy for the season. Midfield is the big one here, nice and colourful here. Brought these guys in here. So we've Ruben Neves. And again, these are not guys I think we're going to get. These are guys we've basically been linked with. And clearly we're always getting linked with these midfielders for obvious reasons. But Ruben Neves is there. Mateus Nunes is a boy that we should have really bought, but we didn't buy. We let him go to Wolves, and now we're probably going to have to pay more money for him than if we had just went and bought him. Of course, the golden child is there on the left, Jude Bellingham, playing on the right for us, but on the left of this graphic. He's the key to this whole transfer window, I think, in terms of, I think if we bring Jude in, it'll be fantastic, but whether we'll bring in enough players to put around him to give him the opportunity to flourish on the back of a really big move where the pressure will be on him. I think he's more than capable of doing it. But my biggest fear is if we do spend 140 to 150 million on Jude Bellingham, Will we have money available to put the other pieces in place to allow him to have the season and hit the ground the way we want him to? That would be my concern. Of course, this man needs no introduction from the World Cup. Alexis McAllister, absolutely brilliant from Brighton, needs no introduction. Man, we've been linked with heavily at the moment, Mason Mount. I know, listening to the boys on Coppish and stuff like that, the boys have an interesting view on it. Drifty is all in on him. The two boys are more questionable about him. Not too sure, would he flourish in a Klopp system? The big thing I think with Mason Mount at the moment is we're just not too sure what position he plays or what's his best position. So how do you deploy him in a formation, and what is the formation that best suits what he gives you? And then that becomes a little bit, when that becomes a little bit unclear, then it has a net effect throughout the rest of the setup and stuff like that. So I'm not too sure. Gravenberch is a guy I spoke about a few weeks ago on the show and stuff like that. Really, really good player there. The move from Holland or the Netherlands to Bayern Munich hasn't quite worked out for the lad, but certainly a very, very good footballer. Wouldn't cost us an arm and a leg, but definitely worth looking at and look at bringing in. And then we have Gavi off Barcelona, which would be a real stretch for us to convince that man. Could we do it? Yes. Will there be other people there more interested? Yes, and they might look more desirable, depending on how our season finishes or whether we get top four or not. But Gavi would certainly be a player that we would be bringing in. I mean, imagine we brought in Jude and Gavi, and we talk about midfields being set for a decade. You know, the way we talk about Real Madrid, and we talk about, obviously, Modric and Kroos have been there for so long. But now you've got Tchouaméni, you've got Camavinga, and then they're looking at Jude Bellingham as well. Imagine that midfield set for a decade. We would be in a similar position, bringing in the right players and how we deploy them. Up front is an area I'm not too worried about. I mean, obviously for midfield, for ourselves as well, Stefan's had a breakout season. Looks like he's going to be a stalwart in there as well. Brilliant player. Looks the business, looks well up for it. Obviously, we have Fabinho there as well. There has been somewhat of a drop-off at times. He has shown shades of what he was about previously, but not enough this season. Hendo, I think is going to have to take a bit of a step back. At times he's come in and shown a little bit of what he can do, but mainly this season he's been missing. Now, I don't know, is it a case of the whole quad season as Randy's guys dry, or whether they need kind of a summer off in the preseason to come back rejuvenated or not. Can they do that and find some of their form? But certainly they're another year older. Obviously Harvey is there, who's come in and done some bits this season. Carvalho is there as well. A weird one, Fabio Carvalho for me as well. Came in, was doing okay. Had a good game against Newcastle, had a good game against Man City, and then just disappeared off the face of the earth. We don't know what he wanted to do, but he was just gone and he wasn't involved. And then came back in slightly and stuff like that. A bit more disheartening for me because he's not getting enough minutes and stuff like that. And what are you expecting him to do? But looks a real prospect and was an unbelievable player for Fulham in the Championship. We spoke about James already. So being a utility player, is it a big deal if we give him another year? Is it a position that he feels where we should be putting someone else in there? In truth, the one that's given out to a lot about, we talk about James Milner and Jordan Henderson. I think with James Milner, I think when he comes onto the pitch, you can use him for a certain amount of time and in certain games, and very useful from the bench if you want to shut things down a bit and stuff like that. And the drop off is not as significant as when we've brought other players on and stuff like that. The forward line, then, when you look at the forward line, obviously we've got Mo Salah here, who's put up numbers this season somewhat. Obviously has broke a few records, overtaking Robbie Fowler and stuff like that in the goal scoring records and stuff. But again, probably if you sat him down and you asked him about his season, he'd be quite disappointed in the way that he's played. At times he's come in and looked really, really well, but at times he has absolutely gone missing in games. Darwin has been unlucky with a few injuries and stuff like that as well, and obviously got the suspension early on after the Palace game, but has come back in and certainly brings a different energy and aura to the team. When he's on the pitch, he raises people's games, does really, really good stuff, and hard, very unpredictable as well. Speed, bag loads of speed, leaves people for dead and stuff like that. Cody's there as well. Cody has come in, kind of very average for the first, say, 4 or 5 games, and then kind of found his rhythm and found himself in terms of his position in the team, starting to look really good, and certainly looked really promising in that kind of Bobby Firmino role and stuff like that. So let's see how that progresses. Luis Diaz, of course, to come back in. I think when he comes back, he goes straight into that left side role. Absolutely phenomenal player, bags of energy. Again, very unpredictable, very hard to play against. Was absolutely sensational until getting injured. Really was the drive and the energy and the motor in that front line, and was also beginning to find his rhythm with Mo Salah and with Darwin earlier on in the season and stuff like that. So it'll be great to have him back, hopefully after the international break. So that kind of fits our front. I'm not worried too much. I mean, Jota is the one that I'm thinking about. He's come back. He's looked rusty. He hasn't looked really like the Diogo Jota that we know. But might come back next season. There's also talks linking him with Newcastle as well, because when you see the players that we have there, we obviously have Mo, we have Darwin, we have Cody, we have Luis Diaz, and we have a number of forward players. So where does he fit into that mix? Where does he come into that front 5, front 6, whatever it is, And depending on the formation that we play, remember, if we go with a 1 up front, which is Darwin, if he's the target man up front, then you got a bunch of these guys, the likes of Mo, Cody, Luis Diaz, Diogo Jota, all drop into midfield. Now, if you land some of these signings here, who becomes the bench players, who goes in, depending on the formation that you play and what way you deploy them. Or is it a mixed kind of bag and stuff like that? I mean, obviously, we're not going to sign all these guys, but certainly we need to sign a number of them. And there might be other targets out there as well. These are just a selection of the ones that we've been linked with. But it's a lot. When you look at this and you go through the process of it, and you hear people, content creators and people commenting on Twitter and stuff like that, just go out and get 2 midfielders and central defender and everything, blah, 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 blah. I think a lot more detail has to go into it than that. Obviously, the volume of spend on Jude will impact what happens on any of these other targets. And obviously, there's other free targets out there as well. We know Rabiot's going to come free off Juventus. Had a very, very good World Cup for France. Would be a decent signing for us and stuff like that. So if we do go for Jude, would it then be a case that the spend drops off and we start being linked with free agents and stuff like that? Is that the way we should go? If we don't get you, and then if we can't get some of these players, if we couldn't convince a Ruben Neves to come, or a Gavi or a Gravenberch or whatever it is, do we start looking at second and third and fourth options? Do we have second, third and fourth options is the question as well. And will Klopp begin to park his stubbornness in terms of this rebuild to bring in second, third or fourth options? Because when we dropped Tchouaméni and he went into Real Madrid, there was no other option there. We looked at Mateus Nunes, but we didn't push the button on him. We held out and we held out and we held out. And then ultimately we signed Darwin when we really were crying out for a midfielder or two. And even in the January window, when we signed Cody Gakpo, we brought Cody in, who's going to be a sensational player for us. But again, we needed a midfielder. We brought Arthur Melo in on loan straight away, injured, no use. We knew there was a problem there, that he was injury prone. He'd been out since May, hadn't kicked the ball. So we were rolling the dice on that. It was crazy. That coupled with a number of other players over here on the exit bench that we knew were going, the likes of Keita and Oxenall, just weren't going to play the part that we needed. So that's kind of summary of where I think we're at and what has to be done, stuff like that. So you can see by the graphic and the thinking and everything that I went through how difficult it is to bring in what we want to bring in, stuff like that. I'll go back into the comments now. My man is there. Eno, how are we? What's the crack, Niall? All good, my brother. A bit late, recharging the mobile. Not a bother, man, just a Liverpool podcast. Morris, how you doing, my good fella? Great to see our friend Eddie on Saturday stepping in and looking after shop. Shout out to Eddie. Yeah, he said you were in and I was delighted to see you. And where is everyone hiding? Come out wherever you are. They're probably all watching the Ireland game, which is what we should be doing. But I said I'd drop a show tonight. And I think I'm probably doing cheerleader here. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, quite enough show, but not too bad. No harm to look at these things in isolation. So that's it, folks. Just said to take a quick look at Liverpool, kind of a summary of the season and the assessment and what we can do. I mean, we know what the key issues are facing them now. Investment is obviously huge, still continuing. Squad infrastructure, commercial deals, all that kind of stuff still has to keep on happening, but I'd like to see a clearer communication plan from the owners. I think the owners at times at the moment are kind of taking the piddly there, and they're just playing the fan base off each other to deflect from the real issues at the ownership level, But we would like to see proper support as well for Klopp in the market this season. There's a massive rebuild on the cards. He has to get proper financial support there to do what he needs to do at Liverpool. We can't have this man's legacy being one league and one European Cup. I know about the domestic trophies and the Super Cup and the World Club Cup and all that good stuff, but the reality is where it's at is the league and the Champions League. That's what you'll be judged on. I'd like to talk about top four as well, just before we finish out. Top four, whether we make top four or we don't make top four, can't be a deterrent in relation to the financial investment that needs to be done at a squad level. We can't turn around and then come out with excuse we don't make top four, because the reality of it, the people who are complaining about the financial money that's available from not making top four that won't be there are the people who ultimately caused it in the first place. So it's really, really important that we understand that. Eno back in as well. His daughter, Alison, it's her birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday to Alison. Shout out to you from everyone here at the Shankly Sessions and the upper tier. Hope you have a great day and hope mum and dad spoil you. But I think the other thing that's really important as well is we need to find a way to reunite the fan base as well. The fan base at the moment is really fractured. And I think it's starting to come around in terms of its thinking. We've seen some of the bigger content creators and all starting to turn around to that idea that, we can't keep on putting out these excuses in relation to not landing targets and not giving Klopp what he needs to really compete. We can't expect him to keep on creating miracles like he's done through a squad and wring it dry and expect to go again and go again and go again. You have to give him the ability to do what he needs to do. But having said that as well, I think we need to be a bit more ruthless in our management of the squad as well. I think from Klopp's point of view now, the hugging and the kissing and the smiling needs to be parked a little bit, and there needs to be maybe a distance put between him and the squad in terms of, I'm the manager, I have to manage this club in a certain way now, and it can't be. I think the problem that we've had in terms of that loyalty situation that we spoke about a number of times this season is the fact that he grew so close to these players, and it was kind of a romantic journey that we kind of went on nearly in terms of football, and it overshadowed what really needed to be done, and the big one, of course, make Anfield a fortress again. We have to make Anfield a fortress. Whatever happens out there away, our home form has to greatly improve. And of course, when we're looking at medical teams and sporting directors and sports science and tactical teams and all this kind of thing, we have to bring in the best in class. We have to bring in, we can't just bring in something that fits the flavour of just what the manager wants or what the ownership wants, or it saves money or it does this or it does that. We've learned from that now that you have to have the best, otherwise things go to pot. I have to go out in the morning, buy her birthday cake last minute. Not a bother, get her something nice. So it's really important that we set the bar really, really high, because next season is going to be really, really difficult. United potentially getting in new Qatari owners. They're going to have a huge amount of money to spend. They're going to refresh the squad, do all the things that need to be done. They're going to be an absolute force next season. Arsenal, obviously, if they do see out the title race, win the title, they're going to strengthen. There's going to be more money there as well and look very attractive. Chelsea are going to come like a tidal wave as well, more investment, stuff like that. Bowley is not going to be happy where they're sitting with the investment he's made, so they will push on. Newcastle will begin to start structuring the team with some really good world-class players and stuff like that, and filtering out some of the players they have there probably to the bench that aren't what maybe fits the actual goal of what they want to do, which is ultimately top four. So you're looking at a top four race now that maybe originally was around 5 teams. Now that top four race is probably going to be around maybe 6, 7 teams. So it's going to be more difficult, and especially if we don't make it this year. and we end up in the Europa League or the conference, and we're playing Thursday, Sunday. Thursday, Sunday football is going to be horrible. But let's see what happens. 10, 11 games or whatever it is to go. So we have still a chance to make top four, but an absolute nightmarish week coming up. Don't forget, tune in tomorrow night. I'll be on Dynamo's Dozen as we complete the road to WrestleMania 39. Check out the channel, Dynamo's Dozen there. We'll be live from 8 o'clock. We've got lots to go through, lots of stuff going on. We're going to be talking Fury Usyk being cancelled. We're going to be talking about Becky Lynch on RTE's Tommy Tiernan. Absolute crazy stuff kicking off over that. And we're going to be talking about CM Punk's Instagram story that went out and got clipped. And he had a lot to say. I'm sure Ian will have plenty to say on that tomorrow night as well. So check that out. Thursday, I'll be back with Thursday Tier Talk with Darren. Of course, we'll be previewing the Premier League, which we'll be happy that'll be back with Beat the Bookie and all the good stuff and going through the headlines. And of course, we'll be getting Darren's flavour on Conte now officially gone, and Stellini stepping in with Ryan Mason. He'll give us his thoughts on that as well and what way it's going to go. And then I'll obviously on Friday, I'll be dropping a preview for the City game lunchtime on Saturday. So make sure you check that out as well. So yeah, we're back in the hot seat again. All action, plenty of podcasting to be doing, plenty of content going out. Stick with us. If you're enjoying the shows, of course, subscribe to the channel, share it out there, hit the bell notification to be alerted when we go live, and of course, drop a like on the videos. I'm off to watch the last of the end bits of the Ireland game versus France. Enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe, and we'll see you real soon.